Hey, peace and blessings, everybody. I'm just back with part two of that, kind of analyzing addiction through the bioetheric feedback loop. Now, we're going to kind of pick up where we left off. Let's see here. Okay, so we were talking about, let's see, electrical dysregulation, bioenergetic state of addiction. So we're kind of going outside of addiction being a chemical thing, chemical dependence or something like that, as they call it or whatever. And we kind of, because basically in this model that we're talking about, every chemical reality in your body, there's an energetic reality that precedes it. So yeah, so trauma and everything like that can manifest through your body through sickness, as well as in the sense of like how we talked about Dolores Cannon. She talks about that as far as illnesses and stuff. That's just, I didn't get this from her work, but she is an example of a person with a body of work that also talks about this. So in studying this, I ran across the work of Dolores Cannon, and I found it to be quite beneficial. So that's one person who talks about this. Carl Jung talks about the acausal factors. That's something else that we've kind of been talking about for a while. We didn't necessarily call them acausal factors and everything like that. Would say things like principles being out of balance and patterns in your life, vicious patterns. That's how the experiential styles it, or whatever case may be. But as we can see, principles being out of balance or what have you, that equates to acausal circumstances, because like how we did the mean meaning exercise, or we were talking about the mean meaning exercise, and we were talking about taking various situations that have very little, if anything, in common, probably totally different scenarios, places, people, circumstances, and things going on. But these things may have a common theme, or whatever case may be. And that common theme and how you deal with that particular theme will determine the favorable or unfavorable outcome of those situations. It takes a level of sobriety and awareness to even understand that connection, because sometimes it's not easy to see. So that's a thing. Okay, so let's move on. Bioetheric field pathology, PIP, and energy field analysis. Technology is designed to visualize the subtle energy fields such as polycontrast interference photography, PIP, offer a direct measure of the bioetheric disequilibrium. So it's technologies similar to Kirkland photography and everything that allow you to measure the biofield, and you can kind of see the fluctuations within it. Similar to how people measure the brain electricity with the EEG. Observations conducted using PIP on individuals experienced. No, we ain't talking about the insurance, the PIP insurance. Using PIP on individuals experiencing addiction, such as a young crack cocaine addict, documented critical findings regarding the structural integrity and function of the energy field. Okay, so basically what they were talking about, a critical finding from this analysis using this PIP, polycontrast interference photography, right? Similar to Kirkland photography and everything like that, where they use to see the aura, crown chakra leakage, and brow chakra state. So they were saying that the crown chakra is leaking. Okay, we're talking about this stuff in the sense of electrical phenomena. So when I say crown chakra, I'm talking about a collection of nerve ganglia in a particular region of the body. It's kind of like a nerve command center, so to speak, for lack of a better way of putting it. And typically when we deal with chakras on that side of things, you're going to have a corresponding endocrine gland that goes with that. You see what I'm saying? And as we saw when we were doing some of the research, Heart Math Institute, everything like that, even the heart is viewed as a gland. You see what I'm saying? It secretes. It has secretions and hormones and things like that. The heart has its own brain. The heart has its own thing going on. So that's a whole nother conversation, in which we conveniently have a video for talking about some of that. Okay, so a critical finding was the observation of significant crown chakra leakage energetically. The crown chakra is associated with connection to universal energy or higher consciousness, right? The leakage symbolizes the profound loss of spiritual connection or energetic void identified by Jung. Okay, so the energetic void is something in your life psychologically that's off balance or what have you, and it creates this particular leakage, what it's talking about, forcing the individual to seek chemical or behavioral substitutes to find this deficit. Now, this is what it's showing from this polycontrast interference photography, crown chakra leakage. You see what I'm saying? This is what it's showing. Okay, forcing the individual to seek chemical or behavioral substitutes to fill the deficit. So whatever psychological leakage or whatever case may be, the addiction kind of fills in for that. Concurrently, the brow chakra was observed to be wide open, suggesting a state of unmanaged hyperperception. So basically the filter that exists between the physical and the higher ethereal, or the blueprint, so to speak, it's being damaged. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, it's kind of being damaged, or whatever case may be. So they have potentially heightened certain heightened I don't know, inclinations or flashes of certain heightened states or what have you. You see what I'm saying? That particular brow energy or what have you. But it's not orderly. It's disorganized. It's what's the word? It's at a level of dissonance. Okay, so the brow chakra was observed to be wide open, suggesting a state of unmanaged hyperperception or psychic sensitivity. Again, they have these things going on. The drugs create this. It thins the veil even more for them, or whatever. This filter that we're talking about, that allows you, that prevents you from interfacing with the ether at large or what have you. It thins this veil or whatever case may be. In this case, it's talking about a heightened brow chakra activity and a degraded crown chakra activity and everything like that. The analysis concludes that the addict is often intensely perceptive, but lacks the psychological tools to integrate or handle the overwhelming sensory and energetic information they receive, reinforcing the urgent drive to numb or escape their heightened internal reality. So they'll have an accelerated reality, like how we talked about in the video about the Bardo states or whatever. When you enter the Bardo, I think it's called the Bardo Adharmata. You have the Bardo of dying, where the field is decoupled from the physical semiconductor or battery, which being the body. The second Bardo that's mentioned in that video, the Bardo of Dharmata, the Bardo where your field interfaces with the etheric field at large, and you get all these impressions rushing in. Whatever you believe in, if you believe in Jesus, you're gonna see Jesus and the angels. If you believe in Muhammad and Allah and all that, you're gonna see some thematic representation of that. Buddhism, Hinduism, Egyptian stuff, whatever it is that you believe in, because it operates off the neural pathways that you got built. So it don't mean this or that is right or wrong. It's just that's what you spent your time investing in. That's the neural pathways that have been built or whatever. So when you exit this, those are the themes, those are the images that you're going to see associated with the themes that you've collected and modeled your mind after. It has nothing to do with whether your or my religious philosophy is correct, so to speak. It's just what you've been exposed to and how you built your mind. You're building your mind. When you read certain literature, you're doing certain things or whatever, you're literally building your neural pathways. And this is what you're going to see when you leave out of here. It don't mean you right or wrong as far as your spiritual conviction. It's a way, it's a means to an end, and it's to get you to a certain place or whatever case may be. It's like how we talked about in the previous video, our spiritual cultivation is in line with voltage or charge amplification. So that's really what we're trying to do. That's what the whole spiritual journey is. You're trying to enhance, you're trying to increase your voltage to an extent. Okay, so Kundalini buildup and external attachments. Further observations reveal an extensive Kundalini buildup, right? Talked about that energy that's on another phase that builds up and it comes out. And if the body is not at a certain level of coherence, right, it can cause a shock or a negative sensation in the system and everything like that. So people probably have Kundalini experiences all the time. It might manifest as a seizure or stroke or something like that, or whatever the case may be. If their body is not, I don't know, coherent enough to deal with that large influx of electricity. Okay, so further observations revealed an excessive Kundalini buildup, seen spiraling in a whirlpool action at the base of the spine. Kundalini represents a potent, dormant spiritual or life force energy. Its excessive turbulent buildup indicates a massive, blocked energetic charge that is unable to be channeled productively. A blocked energetic charge that has no way to be channeled productively, okay, or for creative or transformative purposes. Instead, the potent energy is trapped in a repetitive, destructive feedback loop, right? So this same energy is trapped in it can't release itself or be expressed, so it's trapped in a repetitive feedback loop of destruction. Okay, additionally, very strange attachments were observed on the inner layer of the aura. Still talking about this PIP, this photography, this actual method that they have to observe these things. Okay, these anomalies suggest a parasitic energetic relationship, right? Okay, let's go back over that. Additionally, very strange attachments were observed on the inner layers of the aura, right? And we said on a previous video, if the aura was grass, the melanin would be the soil that the aura is grown out of. You see what I'm saying? Aura in medical terms is human biofield for your research purposes, right? So these anomalies suggest a parasitic energetic relationship, potentially non-physical entities or entrenched self-generated thought forms that feed directly off the energetic leakage and disequilibrium, actively perpetuating the chronic compromised electrical state that sustains the addiction. Now, this is what they see again in what's called PIP, polycontrast interference photography. So this is where that comes from. This is where that whole thing about the brow chakra, the crown chakra, and all that stuff like that, that's where I'm getting that from. That's not my personal interpretation. That's because I don't really talk like that. That's not my personal interpretation. That's coming from that. Okay, so basically that kind of goes back into what we were talking about the survival mechanism of patterns. It's likening that to what's being observed as some sort of parasite feeding off of that leakage of energy, similar to when we were talking about the 48 laws of power. That's a similar idea as a hole in the energy, or we've talked about leaking energy before. And if you go back to the playlist on the 48 laws of power, we're gonna get back to that and finish that. I think we're up to about 20 something in that playlist. So but we talk about leaking energy, holes in the energy, vulnerabilities that exist. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so causal relationship, electrical dysregulation, and the bioetheric feedback loop, right? This confluence of bioelectrical findings establishes the systematic collapse inherent in addiction, right? The psychic pain and unaddressed subconscious data. Psychic pain and unaddressed subconscious data, right? The karma residing in the DC system, right? That Becker was talking about, manifests as energetic pathologies. And we talked about that when we talked about the meridian system and the Marmor points in the previous video, right? Manifest as an energetic pathology, crown chakra leakage, attachments, and Kundalini stagnation. That's what we just talked about in the PIP analysis of it or whatever. Those are just some of the things that can manifest as a result of that or whatever case may be. This energetic field collapse is the physical expression of DC disequilibrium. So that's some interesting stuff. That's interesting because a lot of this, let's say like you'll have the disease is, not disease, but the addiction is coming out of some sort of sense of lack or whatever case may be. And instead of due to the fact that the person is not doing what they're supposed to do to be fulfilled or whatever case may be, they engage in this, and the fix, so to speak, is the symbolic representation of the unbalanced thing that they need to do. It's a mirror of what they need to be doing in an unbalanced form, sort of. So this energetic field collapses physical expression of the DC disequilibrium. The resulting chaotic field then projects back into the environment through the reflection principle, driving the attraction of synchronous events that facilitate the compulsive behavior. So now this is talking about acausal circumstances. We talked about this in part one. Go back to part one. We talked about acausal circumstances. Carl Jung talks about that in a lot of his work. Let's see here. Basically, acausal circumstances varies, like we talked about in the beginning of the video. I think we spent a little bit of time on it yesterday or whatever. Things that don't line up to A plus B equals C. You see what I'm saying? They're outside of our logical processes of the mind. They're outside of the logical reasoning of the mind or whatever case may be. And they're more thematic in nature. You see what I'm saying? They're more based on theme instead of 1, 2, 3, ABC 1, 2, 3 logic. You see what I'm saying? Themes being balanced, themes being unbalanced, creating patterns and stuff like that. Everything coming out symbolic, because this is the language of the subconscious mind, the language of the collective unconscious. All this stuff, it don't talk like how we talk. It has a language all of its own. When we deal with psychology, you study Carl Jung stuff. He's talking about these broad categories, themes and archetypes and stuff like that. When you study, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're talking about large, broad categories and stuff like that. That's how this stuff manifests in its rawer form. By the time it gets down to us, it's a Snicker bar or a pair of Jordans or something, or your baby mama or something, however it may go. When it's up there, when it's at its grosser form or whatever case may be, when it hasn't been distilled down to our level or whatever, it's more thematic in nature. Okay, so thematic manifestation, Cannon's model of psychological root causes. Okay, so this goes into Dolores Cannon, and some of her work. If you get into some of her work, she has some interesting stuff. She has her stuff is a whole rabbit hole in itself. In her method of hypnosis, what we are going to deal with is the whole idea that diseases and everything like that have their origin in psychological states and everything like that, and that's the body trying to talk to you, but it's not. It don't speak like how we speak. It ain't speaking human language. It's speaking in symbols and symbolic languages and themes and stuff like that. And even the sickness, though on our level, oh, that's a cold, that's a flu, that's the measles, or whatever it may be. I'm just using hypotheticals. That's a symbolic representation of something that the body's trying to tell you in the form of an illness. So these messages come out in situations with other people, forms of types of relationships, all types of things or whatever. It's not going to be human language. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so Dolores Cannon, QHHT methodology. That's her methodology as far as hypnosis. I mean, it's worth a look up. I mean, she has some interesting stuff. Establishes the foundational concept that the subconscious mind is not merely a storehouse of repressed memories. The subconscious mind is not just a storehouse of repressed memories, but a profound reservoir of universal knowledge and wisdom. Remember, we said the ether in Vedic cosmology is called Akasha. Thus, and you have a thing called the Akashic records that are associated with the ether. Remember, Brother Asar told you in a previous video that the informational substance of the informational contents of each ether, at least a portion of that, is the collective unconscious of human beings, because we're composed of all of that. You see what I'm saying? Though we get caught up in what this stuff looks like on paper, In this others to self portion of the book, we're exploring what it looks like on paper, like the scientific aspect of it. But make no mistake about it, we're composed of it and we're inside of it. So it just as well as it looks a particular way on paper, it also has an experiential counterpart, like I've been saying for years at this point. So let's see here. Let's move right along. Okay, so let's see here. Not merely, reservoir universal knowledge containing information about beliefs, experiences, and potential healing paths. The premise holds that the body possesses an innate ability for self-healing. Okay, so then we talk about the nervous system that Becker was talking about, the DC, analog nervous system, and it's the nervous system that deals with cellular regeneration and healing, no coincidence. So, okay, so back to Dolores Cannon, she says, subconscious mind containing information about beliefs, experiences, and potential healing paths. The premises hold that the body possesses an innate ability for self-healing, which can be activated by accessing and encoding the information within these subconscious reservoirs, right? Encoding the information within these subconscious reservoirs. Consequently, addiction is classified as pathological manifestation. So it's a mental pathology made manifest. You see what I'm saying? A failure of the conscious ego to access and utilize the comprehensive wisdom and self-healing potential of the subconscious or higher mind. Okay, illness as symbolic manifestation of unmet need. So basically in her framework, like I think we talked about previously, illnesses are symbolic manifestations of unmet needs. We talked about that a little bit earlier in this video. Illnesses, addictions, most of our negative behaviors and everything like that is some sort of need, psychological need that's going unmet. All those specific prescriptions details on how psychological deficiencies manifest as thematic illnesses are largely inferred within the available literature on Cannon's work. The core premise that disorders arise from deep-seated psychological roots is consistent. It is hypothesized that deficiencies in fundamental psychological needs, such as the need for safety, love, control, validation, or spiritual connection. So as you can see, even saying stuff like that, those are broad things. Those are like, we may hear that and it comes out however it sounds to us as individuals, but those are broad categories akin to themes like how we've been talking about, or projected by the subconscious, unconscious. This projection takes the form of a pathological compulsion, an addiction, that thematically selects an actively or substance designed to provide an immediate, albeit false or distorted, fulfillment of the missing psychological element. So basically, we're saying substances. It could be a substance. It don't have to be a substance. It could be a substance. It could be gambling. It could be anything. You see what I'm saying? But that addiction is a symbolic representation of what you need to do out of balance. You see what I'm saying? Let's see here. Whatever that psychological need, and sometimes you'll be surprised. The blueprint has interesting artistic kind of ways of styling some of these themes, as you'll see when you actually pay attention to some of this thematic fulfillment in drug addiction. For substance abuse, the thematic deficiency is often rooted in a deep unmet need for internal peace, connection, or emotional unity. The substance, whether alcohol, narcotics, or chemical stimulants, provide an immediate, profound chemical alteration that stimulates this desired internal state, right? This behavior serves as a rapid, distorted shortcut to the powerful feeling of wholeness or spiritual connection that Jung termed genuine conversion, right? The chemical effect temporarily fills the crown chakra leakage. Okay, so back to that. The chemical, energetically, it temporarily fills whatever that void that you're missing as far as that's concerned, making the addiction thematically a spiritual deficiency compensated by material means. So basically, the drug has become a a physical, tangible band-aid for a spiritual issue, basically. Okay, thematic fulfillment in a gambling addiction. So, okay, in gambling addictions, the thematic deficiency is frequently identified as an unmet need for control, power, or false material abundance. Pathological gambling is characterized by cycles of repeated compulsive betting that continue despite severe negative life consequences. Okay, wow. So it's basically saying a person is having a lack of feeling a lack of power or in their circumstance or whatever. That's one of the things that leads them to gamble and everything like that, so they can feel empowered or whatever, or feel like they're beating the odds or what have you, so they can succeed over their situation. Which again, this is a reflection of what they may actually need to be doing, but in a distorted form. What they may actually need to be doing, they may have to just get their affairs in order to get out of their situation, versus gambling, trying to get out of their situation in a shortcut type of way. So, and again, I ain't judging nobody. This is a general conversation. So, let's see, the act of gambling, especially when accompanied by the illusion of streaks or faded luck, synchronicity, provides the thrill of risk and a distorted sense of mastery over external economic reality. The thematic manifestation compensates for profound inner feelings of powerlessness or chronic scarcity, right? Okay, so again, we have those themes. Scarcity is a theme we talk about in the experiential, okay? Let's see here, psychological factors and situational creation, right? Addictions share common neurocognitive deficits, including compromised executive function and elevated trait impulsivity, which are linked to dysfunctional activity in the prefrontal cortex. So this is how it looks from a biological perspective when you examine the brain, what's going on with addiction. The psychological deficiencies act as a energetic template that dictates the creation of external realities. So the psychological deficiency is saying operates, it forms a template of what the expression is going to be on in the external reality. I think we've talked about that. That's a large part of what we call in True Master the language of situations, or what have you. Okay, since the subconscious is programmed to seek the thematic fulfillment, themes. It's not you. You don't want a pair of Jordans. It's some theme that represents, and in your mind, it's some archetype or theme or something like that suggests in your mind or whatever, that's represented by the physical thing. Because on the level that we talking about, all the physical stuff that we like, it's not on that level. This is raw mental data, raw thematic stuff grouped into larger categories and everything like that. By the time it gets on our level, then we get what we call particulars or whatever. But the rawness of it has nothing to do with the thing that you think that you want, right? So you just want to make that clear. It has nothing to do with whatever it is that you think you want in the situation, or whatever the behavior is that you're doing or whatever. It has zero to do with that. In actuality, it's something of a higher order. Okay, so let's see. It actively utilizes Jungian synchronicity to manifest the necessary external situation that allows the behavior to occur. So you always gonna find that fix. The fix is always gonna be available, or whatever case may be. You ever, like we talked about in the previous video in the part 1, you'll be trying to do something different with your life or whatever case may be. You'll be trying to quit something or stop doing something cold turkey or whatever, and you'll start to see all kind of opportunities for you to go back and do that again. Remember we said that from the perspective of self to self, in the experiential, patterns are sentient. You see what I'm saying? Every time you do that or get that fix, it feeds the pattern. It's a psychological reality. You see what I'm saying? In your mind. Like how we talked about, these are standing waves in the mind and everything like that. Go back to the video on where we talk about dreams, the Bardo states, and mental archetypes. Okay, the compromised function of the prefrontal cortex, which regulates the choices between immediate and long-term rewards, ensures that the organism consistently selects the pathway offering the quickest thematic gratification. Themes, what we're calling principles in the previous literature, whether chemical alteration or a rush of risk, thereby reinforcing the destructive bioetheric feedback loop. Okay, comparative analysis, drug versus gambling addiction through holistic lens. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so we're gonna do this real quick. Okay, the primary thematic deficiency. Okay, in the drug addiction, the primary thematic deficiency would be the need for immediate internal alteration, profound peace, escape, or spiritual connection. The associated bioelectrical pathology, severe general system instability, crown chakra leakage, kundalini buildup, and external energetic attachment, right? Acausal connection, synchronization with the source of the substance or the environment of use, the fated meeting, the unavoidable party. You see what I'm saying? So basically, so they'll have some sort of thematic need for something or whatever case may be. It'll create this leakage, you know what I'm saying? The biological pathology, this particular energetic leakage, like what we're talking about, and kundalini buildup that cannot be properly expressed and everything like that. And the acausal connection would be you always finding the dope man. No matter where you at, you always gonna find a dope man. You always gonna have a couple of little extra dollars, just enough to get what you need. Okay, so that's the acausal factors or whatever. Because like how we talked about, go back to the video where we talk about the principle, the ego, and the agent. The ego, from the perspective of the experiential, locks you into certain circumstances and creates these bubbles because the ego wants to do what it want to do. The ego might say, man, we finna just chill and be on cloud 9 for the next 6 months. You know what I'm saying? On this type time or whatever case may be, and you in this constant, you see what I'm saying, loop or what have you, as far as that's concerned. And like how we said, the ego has access to the full powers of the mind. You seek to obtain the full powers of the mind. So the ego can generate these patterns like what we're talking about. Go back to the video, survival mechanism of patterns, principle, the ego, and the agent. And it explains how this is viewed from the experiential perspective. And from the experiential perspective, the ego is sentient. The patterns that it produces are sentient. You see what I'm saying? And it has its own thing going on. The principle, the blueprint, the soul has a certain program that it's trying to run. As far as good karma and all that stuff like that is concerned. Go back to the previous videos where we talked about karma being a part of the feedback loop, and it's constantly trying to repair itself. So you going through these so-called lessons, or these situations in your life or whatever, it's the blueprint trying to get you from where you are closer to its level and trying to repair itself and fix itself and learn things. One sec. But the ego don't care about none of that. The ego say, man, I want to go, you know what I'm saying? I want to go get strung out for the next 6 months. That's what the ego say. You see what I'm saying? So in this example of this scenario, we're using a hypothetical. But like I said, the ego would come to you on that level, and the ego would keep you in this particular bubble. Go back to that principle, ego, and the agent, and this conversation will make a lot more sense or what have you. What the blueprint wants and what the ego has bought into this whole thing, the whole physical mortal thing or whatever. I'm the best thing since sliced bread type deal. And it's all about me and what I want. That's the ego type of thing or whatever. And the ego will keep you in these little things or whatever, these patterns or whatever case may be. Addiction is just one of those patterns. Addiction is just one of these potential patterns. So this is just a revisiting of some of the other stuff that we've spoke about on previous videos. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so in the gambling addiction, the need for external validation, control over fate, power, and false material abundance. All right. So the need to control your circumstances or whatever, this ties into the gambling addiction. Primary focus on the prefrontal cortex circuit dysfunction. Nature is self-similar across scales, so it's going to mirror in the various different levels and everything like that. We're gonna have another video where we talk about the principle of mind, as well as, and we're going to contrast that with pressure mediation. So we're going to see how nature is self-similar across scale. On the etheric cosmic level, you have the principle of mind. On the terrestrial, physical, tangible level, you have, not saying mind's not tangible, but on the, I don't know, pressure level, on the basic local level, so to speak, we have pressure mediation. You have pressure. That's where a manifestation of that would be blood pressure in your body. You see what I'm saying? That's just one manifestation. Like we talked about it, you could measure predator-prey dynamics with pressure mediation, mortality in a society, the rise and fall of a civilization. All that is based on the metrics of pressure. So we're gonna get into the principle of my corresponding with that in another video. So all right. The acausal connection for the gambler would be synchronization with random events perceived as meaningful signs, lucky numbers, predictive dreams, streaks, and everything like that. So it would be things that the acausal circumstances would be things that feed their gambling addiction, that kind of give them more fuel to keep gambling. A new lotto thing comes out, pick 12 or something like that. The new thing come out, the new scratch off come out or whatever, and they walk in the store, you know what I'm saying, at the right times. This synchronicity, because we're talking about synchronicity, it cannot be explained A plus B equals C. It's a level of synchronicity. So commonalities in the addiction circuitry. Both drug and gambling addictions share a critical physiological commonality. They exploit and distort the brain's reward system, right? Leading to tolerance and cycles of addiction. Furthermore, both are intrinsically linked to dysfunctional activity of the prefrontal cortex, right? Resulting in impaired impulse control and difficulties in choosing long-term beneficial outcomes over immediate gratification, right? You're going to choose the quick fix over the situation that makes sense, that you would have to construct over a longer period of time. The investment, the the long-term plan, however it may go. The integration of, that's why you would have somebody, sleeping on a bench or whatever case may be, trying to get, spent their rent money on their last fix or whatever, and they prefer to sleep on a bench rather than to pay their rent. You see what I'm saying? It distorts that aspect of your decision making. Okay, the integration of the model reveals this is a psycho-spiritual crisis made manifest through an addiction. That's what we're talking about. The pattern of actually having the addiction is some manner of psycho-spiritual crisis or whatever, just made manifest. Okay, so the integration of the model reveals a deep commonality linking the energetic neurological collapse, the energetic pathway documentation in the subtle body, specifically the leakage of the crown chakra, correlating directly with the functional neurological regression observed in the brain, slow wave EEG dominance. This suggests that the loss of spiritual or informational regulation within the DC system, this third nervous system we're talking about, directly impacts a higher order decision making. Okay, the loss of informational regulation, these blockages within the meridian system that we talked about before. That's another way of putting it, because these are just various ways of pretty much saying the same thing. Because the blockages in the meridian system, like we talked about, the channels and everything like that, that starts off with trauma. That starts off with psycho-spiritual trauma and everything like that. It personifies as an electric signal, and it is facilitated through the fascia, the melanin, and all the electrical components of your body, all the way down to the cells. You see what I'm saying? And the DNA itself. So the distinction, this distinction in manifestation, chemical versus transactional. The key distinction lies in the nature of manifestation until used to fulfill the thematic need. Drug addiction relies on chemical alteration of the internal state. Chemical alterations of the internal state. So we can take this a step further. You have two things at play here. You have some sort of symbol, like how we talk about in experiential, a symbol and a pattern at play. You have a particular kind of behavior that's repeated. That's the gambling addiction. And in this scenario, the chemical addiction or the drug or whatever case may be, that would be the symbolic, that would be like the symbolic representation. It is still a pattern doing the drug, but at the same time, it's a symbolic representation because it's something to be sought after. Okay, so the key distinction lies in the nature of the manifestation used to fulfill the thematic need. Drug addictions rely on the chemical alteration of the internal state, often leading to physical dependency and tolerance as the body adjusts to the exogenous manipulation of its reward chemistry. Okay, so this is a thing. This also ties into people in our life. That dude, them dudes that you like to keep going upside your head. You know what I'm saying? That girl that you like to keep cheating on you, however it may go, keep getting with cats in your family or cats in your circle. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Whatever a person may be going through, the people that they gravitate themselves toward, that's very similar to that symbol or whatever case may be, like what we've been talking about for years at this point. Drug addiction relies on chemical. Okay, conversely, gambling addiction focuses on the transactional illusion of risk and control, maintaining the psychological cycle through external actions and interpretations of coincidence, despite the absence of exogenous drug effects. So they just get a rush off of the pattern, off of doing it. This isn't limited to gambling. You have to look deeper at this stuff. This isn't limited to gambling. This could be a person who's a booster, a kleptomaniac, a person who just cons people. Let's say a man or a woman who may abuse the opposite sex for whatever reason. You see what I'm saying? This could be a whole number of things. It's just we're viewing it through the lens of gambling and a substance addiction, because one is a pattern and one is an actual substance. But as you can see, this can take on multiple different forms, and it also and we're bringing in the acausal factor, because I'm sure we've heard people talk about drug addiction and all that stuff like that. We're taking it out of the context of some sort of chemical dependency and bringing it more into the line of a psychological dependency or whatever case may be. So how can I really say, potentially if you took that particular drug away, if you didn't have that, if you didn't resolve the psychological issue, if you took that particular drug away, in theory, you're just gonna find another drug, because the core issue has not been addressed. So it's just gonna be pushed out through the system, through the feedback loop in another way. Okay. So although the vehicles of addiction differ, both manifestations share an overwhelming focus on the immediate reward, demonstrating the severity of systematic dysregulation caused by the energetic deficit. The bioetheric feedback loop reinforces any behavior that delivers the quickest and most profound energetic chemical shift, irrespective of the long-term cost to the individual's psychological and spiritual development. So their long-term thing is messed up. The long-term perception of decisions kind of goes with that. Okay, so or kind of departs from the person in that. Okay, so the conclusion and recommendations for psycho-spiritual intervention. Recapitulation: the bioetheric acausal thematic continuum. Wow, that's a mouthful. Okay, the analysis establishes a robust, holistic continuum for understanding addictive pathologies. An unmet psychological need, a la Dolores Cannon, creates an internal energetic deficit or leakage. And we examined that with the example of the PIP, that photography and everything like that, and Becker's stuff, which then programs the environment through an acausal attractor field. That's what Jung talks about. And we have another video on this talking about the reflection principle. It's basically your field. The stuff you think about and the stuff that you feel is projected outside is projected through this direct current nervous system, and it infiltrates every aspect of the energy system. This fascia, these fascial junctions, these meridians and all that stuff like that or whatever, and it's exuded out through the body or whatever, and the field at large or whatever is resonant in nature. So whatever you're feeling or thinking, that thing, if you think about it and feel it deeply and long enough, you're gonna start to draw things to you. When you buy a new car, you ain't never see nobody with that car until you bought it. That's acausal. That's another acausal circumstance. You see what I'm saying? You buy the new car or whatever case may be, and now you start seeing people riding down the street with it or whatever. That's an acausal thing. So let's keep going. Let's see here. Addiction is thus understood as a signal, a symbolic electrical representation of a spiritual crisis, right? Right? So addiction is thus understood as a signal, a symbolic electrical representation of a spiritual crisis. So if you're addicted to something, and it's something, some sort of deficiency. If you're addicted to a behavior, a type of I don't know if you constantly drawing the same people in your life or whatever case may be, it's a message in that. You know what I'm saying? A lot of our hardships or whatever case may be, sometimes there can be messages in these things, especially if they're like chronic things that are ongoing. Okay, thematic implications of the holistic model. Intervention based on this integrated model must simultaneously address the psychic void, repair the energetic field, and consciously integrate the acausal connections, right? Energetic restoration and healing the electrical self. Therapy must prioritize the restoration of bioetheric DC current system. This involves repairing the energetic leakage, such as the compromised integrity of the crown chakra, and mobilizing the blocked or distorted kundalini energy. Therapeutic modalities utilizing subtle energy medicine or potentially microcurrent application, drawing from Becker's foundational work on bioelectric stimulation. Okay, they're saying that bioelectrical stimulation may be a thing. I would say a part of it may be therapy. It may be, I would say, as I always say, I would say attack something like this from multiple different vectors. You see what I'm saying? Let's see, would aim to reestablish the correct DC flow and eliminate external energetic attachments. So he would try to do this. So one method of this, or one theoretical method, is to attack it electrically, to try to modulate the field, as it were. You see what I'm saying? Restoration of the systematic bioelectrical equilibrium is a prerequisite for sustained psychological and neurological health. Okay, so the equilibrium of this system that we're talking about, you know what I'm saying, the whole bioelectrical system and everything like that, that's a prerequisite for good physiological and neurological health. So that's interesting. So any type of sickness or psychological disorder, neurological disorder, or any chronic illness or chronic behavior for that matter, would suggest some sort of distortion within the field at large. Okay, so psychological intervention and conversion. From a Jungian perspective, managing addiction requires moving beyond the mere abstinence to perceive a foundational psychological transformation akin to genuine conversation deemed necessary for recovery. Therapy must focus on integrating the unconscious material, the void, and helping the client to understand the compensatory meaning of their synchronous experience. I think that's half the battle. Understanding that there is a feedback loop, and whatever you're going through, it's a message in it. It's something that's trying to be conveyed to you, and it's something, and there's a communication there, and there's a basically, how can I really say it? Things aren't done, nature doesn't do things to punish us. Nature is trying to heal itself. You see what I'm saying? Or it's trying to get, you see what I'm saying? Based off of this model, when things happen in our lives, it's not necessarily a punishment from God. It's a feedback loop. It's a message in it more often than not. But it's not a human level message. It's not a message that you're gonna be able to read out of a book. It's a thematic, abstract, symbolic level of message. Why would the mind communicate with you in a dream in a symbolic fashion, but you want it to talk to you in the Queen's English under normal circumstances? It's gonna communicate how it communicates. Situations, circumstances, illnesses, all kind of things of that nature. You see what I'm saying? Let's see here. The individual must learn to consciously recognize the underlying spiritual deficiency and addictive behavior is attempting to symbolize. You will have to learn to read the language of that the subconscious mind is saying to you. Read the feedback loop. Reading the feedback loop would ultimately, like it's a video I have. I have to go back into it, but I talk about the end of knowledge. The end of knowledge is ending. The end of knowledge is the return of God, the gods. And being able to read the feedback loop will allow us to navigate through a lot of different things or whatever, and allow us to come up with a lot of solutions that we did not previously have access to. So this is a whole, I don't know, just maybe a different perspective of viewing things or whatever. Let's see here. Further investigative work is required to substantiate the mechanistic connections between the bioetheric and psychological realms, correlative pathophysiology, establishing quantifiable systematic correlations between low frequency EEG dominance and specific energetic field pathologies, mapping thematic manifestation, conducting systematic case studies based on Dolores Cannon's implied principles to explicitly map recurring psychological needs, deficiencies against specific thematic physical illnesses and behavioral pathologies, thus redefining understanding of subconscious manifestation process. Oh yeah, so like this, what we talking about? I would say this would almost unlike a whole nother discipline. You would have to have people studying this stuff to really kind of flesh out what all the blueprint entails. But the blueprint and the feedback loop entails. But we know, like, all forms of divination are originating from the feedback loop. That is a manifest. Any form of divination you can arrive at, that's a manifestation of the feedback loop. You getting sick is a manifestation of the feedback loop. You meeting such and such at you know, at a chance encounter, and you learning something new, or you getting that new job, or whatever case may be, that's the feedback loop. So all of this is our the punchline to all this. Our waking reality is most of our experience is an aspect of this feedback loop. So when we take it to the point where we have addictions and things of that nature or whatever, that's an imbalance in some aspect of the psyche or whatever, or some theme in your life or whatever case may be, and it's communicating with you in a somewhat thematic, symbolic type way. It does not talk like how we talk. God never shuts up, but God don't talk in the language that we talk. God communicates in situations, circumstances, and things of that nature. So that's pretty much what I had. This right here we just talked about, this is a recap of a lot that we've been talking about over the past few years, as far as the language of situations and symbols, patterns, and principles or whatever. This correlates heavily with a lot of these self-to-self materials. So I hope everybody got a lot out of that. Like what you've been hearing, like and subscribe. This is part 2 of us going into the bioetheric feedback loop and kind of examining addiction. So this is just, want to do this little piece for this morning. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Peace and blessings, man. Catch y'all on the next one.